Good morning, NFC East. Tone DeShields, man, he's already putting down the cap. He's tipping his cap to me, whatever the heck you're doing. But
I got to tip my cap to a guy who's been doing this thing for a long time at a very high level, man.
a very long time. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't even say a high level. But here we are, Tone. It's Hump Day. It's Wednesday. It's a bye week for the Philadelphia Eagles. But yet, there's still news going on, which is what happens when you're the number one seed, right? And one of the things I kind of wanted to get into yesterday, but when you talk about Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys, you kind of get the rant on for 20 minutes. So we're going to start with this. Nick Sirianni spoke yesterday about the potential of Jonathan Gannon and Shane Steichen getting head coaching jobs. Here's the thing, and I am bringing this up to you backstage for a reason. I think it's very unlikely both of them get a head coaching job. And this is why I think this. There's only 5. There's only 5 openings here. And you got to keep in mind, Dan Quinn's going to be in contention for one of those jobs, probably in Denver because of his relationship with Russell Wilson. Jim Harbaugh will probably consider one of these jobs. Depends on which one it is. It's probably going to be Denver. I know Denver's the attractive one because they got boatloads of money and they do have Russell Wilson, as bad as they were this year. Then you got Arizona. I don't know if they're looking to go young. Houston may try to get Gannon after interviewing him last year. I mean, Carolina's got an opening. Indianapolis has got an opening. Those are the 5. There's not enough seats at the table, Tone.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, you have to think about other guys coming out of the woodworks like a Sean Payton, so it's definitely not going to be as smooth or as easy to get a head coaching job as people may think. Again, a lot of guys need jobs or want jobs. The supply doesn't meet the demand. But I agree with you 100%. I don't think both of them get a job. Now the question becomes, which one of them will get the job? Which one of them will be at the door? That's where you come in. Who do you think is going? Who do you think is more likely to get the job or get a job rather?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Steichen because this league trends toward offensive personnel and offensive. And look what he's done with Jalen Hurts in just 2 years. I think a lot of teams are going to look at that and say, you know what, this is a young guy. He's 40 years old. Jalen Hurts is one of the best quarterbacks in football. I want that. And not only do you have a Jalen Hurts endorsement.
37 years old, by the way.
Yeah, 37. Thank you. Not only do you have a Jalen Hurts endorsement, you got a Justin Herbert endorsement. And look, maybe some of the playoff teams will lose their head coaches. I doubt Brandon Staley is out in LA now. I doubt Mike McCarthy, maybe. It all depends what Dallas does this weekend. I mean, which could be a very good possibility, but I think Dallas will back up the brink truck for Sean Payton if that's the case. I know it's a fantasy, but we have to look at this as Shane Steichen is probably the one to go. And if he does, I actually think Arizona would be a really nice fit for Shane Steichen and what he could do with Kyler Murray. And Michael Bidwell will, again, he'll back up the brink truck to improve that roster. Here's what's going to stink, Tone. So Jordan Schultz of The Score, good friend of mine, he reported yesterday the Cardinals will look to trade DeAndre Hopkins.
I heard about that.
I'm very curious to see how much Arizona can get for a guy like him because this wide receiver class at free agency isn't too good. And I know other receivers will probably end up getting traded this offseason, but the 2 biggest names out there are one's in Houston, Brandon Cooks, and the other one's in Arizona, DeAndre Hopkins, if he does get traded. So how attractive of that job is Arizona right now?
Not attractive at all, if you ask me. Kyler Murray is going to be dealing with ACL injury that he's coming off of. Surgery was successful, but 9 times out of 10, you won't see him until maybe October or November, depending on the progress he makes in rehab. And then on top of that, what's their identity? Yes, I understand Arizona is not afraid to spend the money, but just because you're willing to spend the money, that doesn't mean you know how to spend the money. And they paid Cliff Kingsbury and then fired him 10 months later, maybe 6 months later, if I'm not mistaken. So I have a hard time believing they're just going to change and just become a steady franchise. I don't know if Shane Steichen will be enough to change that. But you brought up the D-Hop trade. I'm trying to figure out what's motivating them to trade him, especially when you have a quarterback you just paid, and if you trade him away, that leaves him with Marquise Brown and I forget their other young wide receiver name. I know they have AJ Green there, but they have another young wide receiver. I can't quite remember his name.
Well, they have guys like Greg Dortch and guys like that. But
yes,
Rondell Moore is probably who.
Rondell Moore, that's who it is. Rondell Moore. Very good young prospect, but still not a number one wide receiver. So again, it kind of reminds me of what Houston did with Deshaun Watson. They traded D-Hop away, and they expected him to elevate everyone else. But that's what happens when you get that kind of money. They expect you to elevate guys. I don't know if Kyler Murray's that good of a quarterback or that consistent of a quarterback. And they say Kyler's going to have a hand in who the next head coach will be. I don't know what it is. Kyler Murray is someone that I just have a hard time trusting. And some of the quirks about his game, is he coachable? Is he teachable? Right? And then it can Shane Steichen, if Shane Steichen is that guy, will he be able to, pull out of Kyler Murray the things that he's able to pull out of Jalen Hurts? It's definitely a question that you have to consider.
It's definitely night and day personality. I'll just say that much. And
big deal.
Shane Steichen's going to have his pick. Maybe Shane Steichen will not want any of these jobs. Like, a lot of these, you got to keep this in mind. Just because a team wants a guy doesn't mean they'll take the job.
Exactly.
So Shane Steichen could say, you know what? I might be better off just honing my skills in Philadelphia another year. I got a good thing going. Same with Jonathan Gannon. Here's the other thing I want to point out here with these two. If they leave, I'm not so sure the Eagles go external for their replacements. I think they got two guys in the building right now that can replace Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon. And for Shane Steichen, to me, it's promoting Brian Johnson. I think he's next in line for an offensive coordinator role. And you got to keep that in mind, too. Some of these guys might get poached from the Eagles because they're looking for promotions and they're looking to become head coaches. And Brian Johnson's done a great job with Jalen Hurts. Why can't he do that running an offense or actually calling plays? Same with Denard Wilson. Denard Wilson, the Eagles put him front and center on a lot of interviews this training camp. I'm like, you know what? This guy could be an eventual Jonathan Gannon replacement. So look for Denard Wilson's name to come up if Jonathan Gannon would leave.
Yeah, you said a key name to me, a guy that I'm pulling for if Shane Steichen leaves, Brian Johnson. I think it'd be important for him to stay. I know some people wrote up Kevin Patullo, and I know he's really close with Nick, but in terms of Jalen Hurts' long-term success and his current success, you have to think about the continuity he's had over the past couple of years with Brian Johnson, having that familiarity. And Brian Johnson clearly has the pulse of Jalen Hurts. We've seen Jalen Hurts elevate his game and play the position at a level that we didn't see before, or that we didn't think that he could reach so soon. We knew he would improve, but we didn't know how much and how quickly, and if the organization would have the patience. But Brian Johnson has, kept this guy sharp. He's allowed him to hone his skills throughout the season. I think you could argue Jalen Hurts has gotten better and better as the season has progressed. Obviously, he was offset by an injury, but I think Brian Johnson would be an awesome candidate. And like you said, there's a chance some of these guys might get poached. So it's going to be important for Nick Sirianni to get ahead of it. And the guys that he believed to be most valuable, he has to elevate those guys, especially if you want to keep them. Because if you're not getting elevated, you're getting fired, like my man Dion would say.
That's a very true statement, by the way, too. One thing, too, and this is where I try to tell Eagles fans, look, I know you don't want to listen to me here, but you got to watch the league because there are a lot of coaching candidates. Dan Campbell's in line to get some of his staff poached. Aaron Glenn might be a head coach. Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator, might be a head coach. And Dan Campbell wants this, by the way. That's why he hired a lot of these guys, because he thought they could be potential head coaches. You see what's going on in Detroit. And like you said, the veterans, Sean Payton, Dan Quinn. There are guys, Jim Harbaugh. Teams are going to want to make a big splash. Not everybody's going to be the Houston Texans to go after the hot young head coach. And I know the Texans interviewed Jonathan Gannon last year. But if I'm a head coaching candidate, and I know they're in line to get a quarterback, what tells me after David Culley, under Lovie Smith that I would want to go to Houston with a GM who hasn't been held accountable yet, but he seems like he's one head coach away from finally getting the boot. So the guy that hires you may not be there for your whole run.
That job is a death sentence. Let's make it clear. I don't believe the Houston Texans really want to win, right? The expectations, and it really upsets me the way they've handled, Cully's firing and Lovie Smith's firing. It really upsets me because, it kind of spits in the eye of the Rooney Rule, and it makes it makes a mockery of it, really. But even beyond that, you put these two coaches, right? These two black coaches, you put them in these positions where they have nothing, no quarterback, no continuity, no real talent, right? And you expect them to be competitive in the AFC. Let's really be honest about this here. Cully had a year to get it done. Really? You give Lovie Smith a year. He's dealing with the same roster Cully had for the most part.
And probably worse.
Probably worse, right? Granted, they had a draft where they got in Derek Stingley. Okay, but come on. This team was unraveling. Davis Mills, really? Like, he's a backup at best. This organization is not, they do not care about winning. They do not, they want to pretend like they do, but they don't. You don't win anything by constantly turning over your head coaching position. It's honestly a joke, and it's disrespectful to a guy like Cully. It's disrespectful to a guy like Lovie Smith, guys who have put in the work in this league, guys who have earned their stripes. It's disrespectful, and I don't condone it. I don't support it. It's honestly a disgrace since the Houston Oilers days, man. Like, I understand the Oilers became the Titans, but just that Houston football culture, from a professional perspective, it's soured. It's terrible.
I was very upset when they fired Cully because I thought Cully overachieved with that terrible team, winning 4 games. They were playing well at the end of the season. Everybody can make a mockery of that. Well, the Detroit Lions were 3-3 in their last 6 games last year. And you
can say the same for Lovie. Lovie got that Texans team to push the Chiefs to overtime.
Exactly. And I wouldn't have minded if Lovie came back another year. If Lovie's job was to just be kind of a place filler for a couple years, I think people can live with that. But it was a mockery of it. It was a mockery of Lovie Smith. It was a mockery of David Culley. And look, did David Culley probably ever deserve to be an NFL head coach? I mean, he was a receivers coach for a lot of years, but he got the opportunity. And he took advantage of it. And yet, Houston still spat in his face and said, nah, man, we're good. So I thought, okay, they want to hire a younger coach. No problem. That was the just kind of get rid of that Deshaun Watson type year. By the way, that franchise is still feeling the effects of what Deshaun Watson did. Because now it feels like they can finally at least kind of turn the page and rebuild here. But you're right. How much commitment to winning do the Houston Texans have? Especially now in the AFC South where, again, it looks like Jacksonville's going to run that division for a long time because Tennessee's on the decline. Indiana, who knows what the heck they're Chris Ballard admitted yesterday. They're still feeling the effects of the Carson Wentz trade because they thought they'd have him for 5 to 7 years, and he's gone. So now they're back at square one. That division is just terrible. And I'm really curious.
It's poorly managed.
Yeah. I'm really curious to see where Frank Reich ends up too.
Yeah, man. I don't think he's going to be in a rush anyway. He's still getting paid. He's still getting paid. I don't think he's going to be in a rush. And shout out to Cully, man. He's still getting paid from Houston as well. You're right. The Jaguars are going to run the division for the foreseeable future. They appear to have the most stability from a coaching and front office perspective at the moment. Obviously, bringing in Doug Peterson changes that. But bringing it back to the NFC East. You think about the coaches who could potentially move on, like we said, Steichen, Gannon, and if the Cowboys don't get it done, if the Cowboys fail this weekend, there's no guarantee Kellen Moore will be there as well. He may want to move on. You never know. You never know that you never know what may happen at the end of the day. Mike McCarthy, could he be fired because of the lack of production from a winning perspective, right? And I feel like Mike McCarthy's actually had a very good season from a coaching perspective. He elevated this team when their starting quarterback went down. He put Cooper Rush in and they devised a game plan to get things done. He showed that he's a good coach. He's a solid coach. Is he a great coach? People have their own opinions about it, but I think he's proven he's a good coach, and he's somebody that you want in your organization to some degree. But man, Jerry Jones is very impulsive. You really don't know how the thing may end up if they lose. He says right now his job is not in jeopardy, but of course the game hasn't happened yet. So this is going to be really interesting to see how this thing plays out. I'm happy for Brian Daboll and what he's done for the Giants. It's going to be really competitive in the NFC East. And then Ron Rivera, man, what's his future? We have no idea what's going to happen when it comes to these two coaching positions in the NFC East when it comes to the Cowboys and the Commanders. So it's going to be really fascinating to see how it plays out in the long run.
Well, the Commanders did make a move yesterday. They did fire longtime offensive coordinator Scott Turner. So Ron Rivera is going to be looking for a new offensive coordinator. It seems like he's going to be the scapegoat, at least this year. And look, while Washington's going through the process of Dan Snyder not being the owner anymore, I think they want some stability there. That's why I think Ron Rivera is ultimately going to stay, because Ron Rivera does provide stability for a franchise, no matter what you say about him. And
he's a grown man. He's a grown man.
He has a strong locker room culture. But yeah, I like how you mentioned Kellen Moore, because Kellen Moore may look for opportunities elsewhere. He might not have a choice. He might be fired anyway, because if Mike McCarthy's fired, the whole staff's fired. So at least that's usually how it works. But I will say this about Jerry Jones. The guy kept Jason Garrett around for a decade. And
that was his boy, though. That was you know what I mean?
Yeah. I will say this, though. Mike McCarthy, I don't think the Cowboys have had consecutive 12-win seasons since their glory days in the early 90s.
Right,
Mike McCarthy has been good. He has. I hate to admit that, and he's had a good year. But I think I'm like you, Tone. I think he's a good head coach. I don't think he's a great head coach, but he does have a Super Bowl. He does know how to win in the postseason, but his postseason success recently hasn't been good. That's why I think they have to win this week.
Yeah, they have to. And I'm not sure if that's a foregone conclusion. Behind the scenes, we have our guy, our resident Giants analyst, Kevin Boilard, man. We're always grateful for him coming in every single week, providing his passion, providing his spark to the game. And, we're grateful. So let's take a break, you guys. You guys are locked in on Good Morning NFC East with Jeff Kerr. I'm your man, Tone DeShields II.